Very good evening and welcome to this special edition of For the Record. Now, every week we're talking about all sorts of topics on this show with Geraldine and Ziad, but tonight we've got someone special in studio and it's Rugby World Cup on everyone's lips. It's less than a month before we take on the Wallabies in the first game at the Rugby World Cup, but before that there's still a lot of work left to be done by John McKee and his coaching staff and the players in camp. They've been working very hard. There's a lot of talk about Fiji this year with the likes of Australia and the newly crowned #1 Wales in our pool, Uruguay, and don't forget Georgia. A lot of people have disregarded the fact that we've got Georgia in our pool, so that's going to be very interesting. But tonight I've got the head coach of the Flying Fijians, John McKee, in studio, talking to him after a long time from the Sports Lounge there. But John, thank you very much for coming on for the record tonight. I know it's been a hectic time for you. Let's start it off. How's things in camp at the moment?
Oh, look, we've been working very hard. The boys have been training this past week with no match on the weekend. They've been training 3 times a day, and that's our last really big work week before we depart for Japan.
Now, you named 32 players about a few days ago. You totally said at that time you will be chopping one. A lot of people are still not understanding why you named 32 instead of the final 31 that's being named by teams for the World Cup, John.
Well, to get our balance right across the squad, it's tricky with 31 players to get the right mix of backs and forwards, and how many front rowers you take, for instance, can affect how many backs you can take. So we made the decision that we would go to the World Cup with 5 props, so that's our plan. But we've kept 6 props training in the group, and the rationale there's a few things. It keeps the pressure on those players to make the final cut. That's one thing, and also if we cut a prop last week and then someone got injured, either this week or against Tonga, then we'd have to call someone back who's been outside the training group. So we can keep that full complement of props training in the group, and we'll make our call after the Tonga match next week as to the 5 front row, the 5 props for Rugby World Cup.
So you are going to drop or minus the 1 extra after the Tonga game when you're back in Fiji, John? Yes,
we'll travel to Auckland with 32 players, and then we'll make our call after we play Tonga.
Talking about front row, I was just looking at the players that you've named. We've got a few experience when Campo comes to mind. You've got Manasa Solo. But I was just looking at the position of hooker, relatively a very new, but Sam Matavesi has been stamping his mark. And there's one position you spoke about when we were talking 2 years back, that hooker was a position where Sunia Koto was the only experienced one. Happy with the mix of hookers now that you've got in the squad, John?
Oh, look, I think we've got 3 very good hookers. They each offer something slightly differently. Sam's got his nose in front at the moment as probably the #1 with his experience plus his really high work rate in the game. Our other hookers offer different things in the game as well. So there's a lot of competition in the hooking spot as to who will be the #1.
Now, Dominico Wangani-Barotu is your skipper, and I've seen him in the past 2 World Cups playing a very leading role despite not being the skipper. Q, a great skipper that we had, has moved out of the setup. A lot of talk about how Dominico has been able to hold the team together. What made you choose Doms as your skipper with a few of the other players as well, knocking on the door, the likes of Nakarawa, who's part of the leadership group, I believe, Kempisi Mafu, etc., John?
Well, I think first and foremost with your captain, you need a player who's highly likely to be selected in the top side. So that can narrow it down a little bit. Dominico, even when he was not captain, always was in the leadership group of the team and a strong member of the leadership group. He has a great understanding of the game, and he always leads by the front. I mean, every time he wears the white jersey, he certainly puts it on the line and leads from the front. I mean, it's not just about the captain, it's about the leadership group, like some of those other names you mentioned. you know, they're in the leadership group, and they're like Dominico's lieutenants around, you know, driving things within the team. Leone Nakawara, obviously, you know, also one of our most experienced forwards and a great player. He had the honour of leading the Flying Fijians against Canada. But although he hasn't got the captain next to his name, I mean, Leone is very much a leader in the team, and he has quite a bit of say around, you know, about driving the players in trainings and games as well.
So basically what you told me a bit earlier on this, before your team was named, you've got a skipper that's Doms, and obviously you've got a leadership group that will play a part as supporting him rather than having vice captains, John.
Yeah, rather we haven't named vice captains because, you know, different players, you know, on a different day against a different team, different players can be on the park. So we've got a couple of leadership groups. There's really a team leadership group that drive a lot of the, you know, the team culture and team behaviours. So that and obviously the captains and that with his lieutenants. And there's also you know, like a tactical leadership group, which is partly experience, and you know, you mentioned Campisi Mafu and Leone Nakawara and players like that, but it's also position based as well, so that on the team you've got the spine of the team in the tactical leadership and understanding how to keep driving the focus in the game and how to keep the players on task with our game plan.
Now, everyone's talking about Australia for the World Cup. Australia named its team in its 31-member squad on Friday, and also Wales, which is the newly crowned #1. I know basically you and the coaching staff have been keeping tabs on them, but what no one is really talking about is Uruguay might become the whipping boys of the pool, but everyone sort of is counting out Georgia, John. Yeah,
Georgia, you know, they're one of the top so-called Tier 2 nations, you know, with ourselves in Japan, and they'll have very high ambitions for Rugby World Cup, and we certainly cannot discount them, and that game will take on as much importance for us as the, you know, the so-called big boys of Australia and Georgia. But you know, really for us, you know, now our preparation, you know, we're really focusing in on Australia, that first block of games. And you know, with our preparation towards Tonga, you know, we know certain things that Tonga will bring in their game, but for us, we're trying to play a style of game that that'll take us into the Australia match, and that's our initial focus. But the pool, there's going to be a lot of twists and turns in this pool, I believe, and it's not going to be cut and dried, and who wins in it. You know, it could come down to, you know, a bonus point or points for and against, and that's why every single game is going to count in the final outcome and the final who makes the top two.
The Wallabies got a hiding against the All Blacks. A week earlier they played very well against the All Blacks. Oh, some say the All Blacks were not that good. And then Wales, now the world #1. There's a lot of talk about us being in a very tough pool. And Wales is almost the third consecutive World Cup that we were the same team in the pool. Australia, the second consecutive World Cup that we're in the pool with them. How do you rate our chances in that first game? And it takes us back to Wales about 4 years back when we played Australia against all odds, holding that scrum for 23 seconds, you know, with still the talk of the town when Australia really tried to dominate. And we pushed them to the wire. But this year, there's this confidence oozing, John, at least on the streets with people, that this could be our year.
Well, you know, we're certainly going to the World Cup with high ambitions. You know, now with just a little less than a month out, we know we've still got some work in front of us. And you know, this game next week against Tonga is very important for us. You know, probably through the PNC, we had really heavy training loads, probably higher than we normally would in a Test match week. So the boys were, you know, a little bit tired going into those games. Whereas, you know, now we're sort of in Rugby World Cup mode almost, and certainly this coming week we'll train like we would in a normal Test match week. So to make sure that we get through the work we need to get through, and fully fresh for the game on Saturday. you know, looking back to Australia and their games against the All Blacks, I think what it does show at the top levels of the game, you know, the margins are actually quite fine between teams, and you know, if a team is really on their game on the day and the other team is maybe 5% off their best, you see what happens across those two games, where the Wallabies had a pretty convincing win first up, and then the All Blacks were equally or even more convincing the second time, particularly since they kept Australia scoreless. So you know, we need to make sure that in the World Cup that we're absolutely on top of our game. We need to go into each game at 100% with the, you know, not just with the tactical and technical understanding, but also, you know, the mindset to perform well under huge pressure, because, you know, the pressure of those games is going to be big, and we need to be our best in the hottest moment, so to speak. So it's going to be a really exciting start in Sapporo. We're going there with high ambitions, and you know, if we can get that win in Sapporo, it'll really help us secure that top 2 position in our pool.
Now, playing Tonga, the All Blacks have said that they play Tonga and they might field a near to full strength side. Australia is saying they're playing Samoa, they might do that as well. A couple of the other big guns. Will we see the Flying Fijians sort of a near to full strength side that we might see in the Wallabies game, the run out against Tonga?
Well, certainly, I think now, you know, we're in World Cup mode, and you know, across the New Zealand Maori and the PNC, you know, we swap players around. We wanted to give players game time. I mean, now for us, it's about getting our combinations right for that opening game. This is our last match before we meet Australia on the 21st of September. So, you know, I'm not saying that the 23 will be the 23 that meet Australia, but I'd anticipate it would be pretty close.
Pretty close, definitely. Now, you spoke about PNC a little bit earlier on. I know you went on record as well saying PNC was sort of a trial and error because you were still juggling with the 40-odd players in camp to pick your final team for the World Cup. What was the overall rating for the PNC this year, John, from your aspect of the Flying Fijians? And now the players that have been dropped, most of them moved to Drua, I believe. So overall, the PNC rating for this year?
Oh, look, I was a little disappointed in the PNC. I thought we were training very well through that period, but we didn't quite that didn't quite transfer into our game performance. Probably, you know, changing our team each week probably didn't help in our combinations, but you know, particularly, I mean, I think we played Japan, and I think Japan definitely were probably about 4 weeks ahead of where we were at that point in time. You know, they'd had a long time in camp together, so they were more advanced in their preparation than we were. I'm not overly concerned with that, because I know that we could improve a lot from where we were at that point. I mean, the disappointing thing against Canada and Samoa was that we we turned a lot of ball over, and certainly we know to be successful against Australia and Wales particularly, we're not going to be able to just score on 1 or 2 phases. We're not going to be able to get a turnover and beat them around the edge. We're going to have to work really hard to be in the right field position. We're going to have to work very hard to build phases, because the opportunity won't come off first, second or third phase. You know, it could take 10 or 15 phases. You know, we saw the All Blacks against Australia. You know, I think they played 23 phases before Barrett scored a try in Perth. I mean, that's the sort of thing that you need to do in against these Tier 1 teams, and that's the area of improvement we're really looking for. But probably a bit more patience with the ball and the ability to really build pressure and squeeze teams in the right part of the field.
Now, Semi Kunatani said the other day that, a great comment I thought, great structure being brought in place by you and the coaching staff in the past 4 years or so, to mix it with the Fijian flair. If you can get that right on the day, we can rattle the world, any team in the world.
Well, certainly. I mean, you know, the coaching staff. You know, we've talked about this a lot. That with our ability to play, we're as good, if not better, as our opposition. But the areas of the game where we need to be really sharpen up on is the fundamentals of, because teams will look at how to stop us playing our game, and teams will be very wary of a Fijian team that can get quick ball and can really move the ball quickly to the edges, and with all our threatening players. So we've got to be, first and foremost, strong around our set piece, so that we not only do we win quality ball for ourselves, but we do put pressure on the opposition ball. And then around the ruck areas, we need to be very accurate in our clean out, so we don't put too many players in, but we make sure that we can get quick ball, because I know Australia have players who are very good at juggling the ball and looking for steals at turnovers. I know the way Wales play, that they'll really look to slow the ball down, and their high level of contesting at the breakdown. So really, it's in our basics and fundamentals that we really need to sharpen our axe, so to speak. And because we know with good supply of ball and with quick ball and continuity, that we can threaten anyone.
Now, you've got a backline that any coach in the world would salivate over. You've got the likes of Kini Muriburivalu, Joshua Tuisova, you've got Nakosi, you've got the evergreen Veronique Ngoneva, whose new club says he's still younger than what his birth certificate says. And you got Waisiana Levu, who's back in the mix. Then you got your halves of Frank Lomani, who's off to the Rebels, Ben Volavola, also Veitokani. How much headache does that give you to pick your match day squad to start, John?
Well, there's a lot of quality there, as you pointed out. And that's probably one of the differences between this World Cup and our last World Cup campaign. I think last time probably our top 15 or 17 players were really top-class players, and then in some positions our depth dropped off a bit, and we probably had to play our top players too much. This time around, much more competition for places, and I'm confident that if a player got injured, that another player can step up in his place and is equally as good. We don't lose anything. So in terms of depth of the squad, we're in a much better place in 2019 than we were in 2015.
Is that one of the reasons, and I know you always talk about this, almost every player in the backline that I see can play in more than one position?
Well, it certainly helps us in the World Cup to have some utility players, because if you just take all specialist players, you can have, well, with the number of the split we've got 14 backs. If you can't just take two in each position, because you need to cover, halfback if you had an injury and can't get a replacement in time. So you sort of really need three halfbacks, and we're fortunate to have someone like Nicola Matawalu who plays on the wing a lot for Glasgow. So you think, well, he's primarily in our squad as a halfback, but he could play on the wing, and it also gives you a different balance around the reserves.
Have you thought about Nicola maybe slotting in one of those positions for the World Cup?
Yeah, certainly. He's in the squad primarily as a halfback, but he can also play on the wing. We've only picked three specialist wingers. Waisnatha Levu is picked as a centre, but he's also, we know, a very good winger, and and he could start in some of those big games on the wing. So Freddie, we know what a talent he is at 10 or 15, and then Josh gives us some good coverage of 10, 12, 15. So, in the World Cup, when we're going to get some niggly injuries and players get a bit dinged up, that having some versatility, particularly in the back line, is very beneficial.
Now, you've dropped some players, and it's always hard for coaching staff to chop their team out when the likes of Patrick Osborne, who came in this time. A lot of talk about also a few of the forwards. How hard was it to narrow it down? Because almost every player this time you had in that 46, including local players, were playing very outstanding rugby. So when you and the coaching staff sat down, how hard was it to chop these guys and tell them, hey, sorry, but you're not going to the World Cup?
Yeah, I mean, it was hard, and you know, some of the players who missed the final cut, would the squad be any different if they made the cut? Possibly not, and you know, there were a couple of pretty close calls there in terms of who we finally decided. But you know, as we try to emphasise to those players as they departed camp, that you know, we've still got a couple of weeks training. We're playing Tonga. You know, if there's an injury, those players have to keep in their mind that they could get called up at any time, and all those players who are out of the squad are on the standby list, so they'll be the first people called up if we get any injuries, either prior to the tournament or in tournament.
Now, it's going to relate back to your coaching staff. Majority of them were there when we were there in 2015. You got Tambai back. You also got your scrum coach, and you got Futu. But you also brought in a few of the new ones to come in. How's the mix with the coaching staff, and then with Swinia Koto acting as that player, coaching staff, middleman? How has it worked so far with the coaching staff, John?
Oh, look, it's really good. I mean, we're really lucky to have Tambai back into the group. You know, he's an excellent coach, and with having both him and Neil Barnes working together at the Chiefs, it straight away brings a lot of synergy to the group, because they've got a very similar role in our setup as they had at the Chiefs. So that makes it easy, because it is a challenge when you bring people from outside in to get them all working together. I mean, you know, we know what a great job Grumpy's done with our scrum over the years, and from where we were in 2013, 2014, we've made massive leaps in that area. And earlier on, we talked about some of the, you know, those younger players coming through in the front row. I mean, Grumpy's had a lot to do with those players' development. And it wasn't just when they got to the Flying Fijians that he started working with them. You know, he worked with them in the Warriors. He's been here for camps with the under-20s and the academy. So all of those young front rowers who have come through have been working with Alan, and he knows our players very, very well. So that's a great asset for us, because it's not just about the Flying Fijians. It's about our whole pathway and our set play development.
Now, Grumpy is sort of the scrum doctor. That's what people call them nowadays. But you know, I'm still amazed that there were times when Fiji would run onto the field and everyone's focus would be on that scrum. And you've just touched on it a little bit, how Grumpy has transformed our scrum. And it takes me back again all the time to the 23 seconds against Australia at the stadium in Wales. But our scrum sort now is not seen as the Achilles heel. Is that correct, John?
Look, we go into test matches now with quite a different psyche around our scrum than we did, 4 or 5 years ago, and that's important for us as a team, because it's not just winning the balls. It's having the confidence that in certain parts of the field that we're going to get good quality ball. In certain parts of the field we can put pressure on the opposition ball and deny them the nice clean ball that they might expect. But certainly, I guess the perception of the Fijian scrum has really flipped itself right around when teams would look to win penalties against us and try to put us under a lot of pressure in that area. I mean, and I'm sure the opposition are taking quite a different view of our scrum now. Doesn't mean it's the finished product. We've still, some analysis out of the Pacific Nations Cup. We still gave away a few penalties in that area, and that's that's one thing we're looking very closely at.
Now, your back row has got, no one can say they are world class. Let's put it that way. You got Tadeli Yato, you got the skipper Dominic Waning-Baroto, you got Semi Konatani, you got William Mata. How does the 6, 7, 8 selection process go? Is it game by game? Are you looking at each match to choose your 6, 7, 8? Because that's going to be, well, at least for us from the outside, it's a tough task to drop one and select the other.
Well, looking at that back row, we've got some superb athletes in that group, and we've got, I would call, an unusual back row. It's not the traditional, you know, tight side, open side, number 8. You know, so and the other thing is for us in the World Cup is that the bench players or finishers, as people are starting to call now, are going to be very, very important in the game. And you know, we pick 4 back rowers for a game. I mean, the player who comes in the game with 20 or 30 minutes to go is equally as important as the starters, because with the athleticism in our back row, we expect those players to have a big impact at the back end of the game. But certainly, you know, we've got Yato there who can really play 6, 7 or 8. He can play anywhere. I mean, Domenico, you know, more your traditional number 6, but you know, with the French style where they still play left and right flankers. Often you'll see our players line up as left and right rather than open and blind. For me, probably one of the big improvers has been Semi Kunatani. We've always known what a really good athlete he is, and you know, we saw, you know, what a great player he was in the 7s. You know, it's taken him a little while to adapt to the 15s game, but he's really every assembly has come to us. I think we've seen a much improved player, and he was, for me, he's been one of the outstanding players across the New Zealand Maori and PNC games, with his, not just with his ability with ball in hand, but his really high work rate in games, his, you know, his defensive and repeat work and defence and making tackles. So Semi's really come up the rankings there, and Viliami's really developing all the time as a number 8. I think he'll be the first to admit that he's still got things to learn about the game. You know, another player who played predominantly 7s is relatively new to 15s almost. You know, he's been at Glasgow for about 3 years now, so he's still learning his craft, so to speak. But you know, he's fast developing into, you know, world class number 8.
Now, you've spoken about those players. Some of the players that, you know, critics will always be critics, and I don't usually touch on all these critics and social media comments and all that, but something that I've seen, and it's great to see, is Waisene Levu from 2015 sort of fizzled away, had a little bit of issues, is back. You've got Leroy Atalifo after 2015 who is back. They got Levan Imbotia after 2015 who is back. So between 2015 and 2019, sort of they were in and out from the rugby circle, but they've forced their way back into the World Cup squad, and it shows that these boys have worked hard. That was needed, that you put out on the table every time you visited them, John. Well,
certainly, I see this year, particularly in the Rugby World Cup, a lot of hunger amongst the players to represent Fiji. You know, they really want to, you know, represent Fiji first and foremost, but you know, to make that World Cup squad, they know it's a once in 4-year opportunity, and how important the World Cup is. You know, the players you mentioned, you know, Weiss, you know, a couple of things. He had some off-field issues, and then, you know, he had some untimely injuries as well. You know, we wouldn't have selected him for probably November tour, but he had a hamstring injury just at the wrong time. And same with Lapani Botia. You know, he had that ACL injury, like he played for us, you know, following, you know, a few assemblies following the 2015 World Cup. Then he had an ACL injury, which really, you know, he missed a November and a June series. And you know, but we know what a quality player he is, and you know, and he was always going to force his way back into the team. I was pretty confident that once he got back playing.
We have spoken a lot about all these Tier 1 nations, and recently there's a great John Campbell documentary done in New Zealand about how Samoa has been struggling in getting its players in, and players giving up national call-ups, etc. Have we been lucky? Because I see your squad and the relationship you've built with clubs around the world has seen all our best players making themselves available, John. So one of those years, but I still know that Fiji's name is floating around, that at times some players are not able to choose country over club, etc. Did we face any issues as such?
Oh, look, you know, I've seen those media articles as well, and I can't really comment on what may be happening with our, you know, our Pacific brothers. But you know, from Fiji's perspective, you know, we have worked really hard in in establishing club contacts, and I've made numerous trips to Europe particularly. And it's not just about visiting the players and meeting with the players and giving them some targets. It's also equally as importantly to talk to the club management or the club coaches about where the Fijian players at their clubs sit in our rankings, so they can have some idea of whether their players could be playing for Fiji or otherwise. So I think we've reaped the rewards of that, in that we've had very little trouble from Europe about release of players from the clubs. New Zealand's a little bit different there, where players are almost, they unfortunately sign contracts that make them New Zealand eligible players. So if they play for Fiji, it affects their New Zealand Rugby Union contract with Super Rugby. So that for me is a little disappointing, and I think it takes discussion at a much higher level than my station. But I'd hope that the Pacific Island Working Group, who are meeting in New Zealand next week, I'd hope that's on the agenda, and they can have some ongoing negotiations with New Zealand Rugby Union, because like a player like Seville Reece is a player like him, they're probably always going to go to the All Blacks, and I say to Sevu, good luck, and I hope you have a really good career with the All Blacks. But there's other Fijian players playing Super Rugby in New Zealand who in reality are pretty unlikely to play for the All Blacks, but they would be valuable players for us, but under their current contractual obligations and New Zealand Rugby Union contractual policy around their Super Rugby teams. That's not possible. So that's disappointing, and hopefully maybe it's not going to change for this World Cup, but hopefully by in the next cycle that we can see maybe more Fijian players playing in Super Rugby in both Australia and New Zealand who are actually flying Fijians.
That was something I was looking at just before I came into the show, is I think, correct me if I'm wrong, John, but just a quick glance through the 32, first time I'm seeing no player based out of Australia or New Zealand.
Well, the thing is, in Australia, all the Fijians seem to be playing for the Wallabies these days.
They've got a Fijian team going there, so.
But I think it's probably partly with the structure in Australia, because the problem for young Fijian players going to Australia, if they're not in Super Rugby, they're playing club football probably in Melbourne, Sydney or Brisbane, which in reality is quite a step up to international level. In New Zealand, we've looked at, there's a number of players playing Mitre 10 Cup, and in the wider list there are a few young players who have come through our pathway and playing Mitre 10 Cup. We're in our wider squad of 50. They didn't make the cut of 32, but I would expect, if you look at our depth chart towards 2023, I'd expect to see some of those players coming through and being frontliners for the Flying Fijians.
Now, Frank Lomani is off to the Melbourne Rebels. Now, I know contractual obligations, etc., is very private, but how does that work? He'll be available for the Flying Fijians, even though...
Yeah. From a coaching perspective for Fiji, it is much better for us to have players in Super Rugby, because the Super Rugby season fits perfectly with the international windows. And also, because they're closer to Fiji, it's much easier for us to keep a track of their progress and get information about their training loads and all that type of thing. So for Frank, that's a great move for him. He also had offers to go to Europe, but he made the decision that at this point in his career that the best move for him would be to play Super Rugby, and I think he's got a great opportunity at the Rebels. Conjecture about what Will Genia will do after the World Cup, and he may move on, but I certainly think Frank will will get a lot of game time in Super Rugby next year, and it will really suit his style of play. And then he'll come back to the Flying Fijians as a better player.
Mm-hmm. Now, we've spoken about the teams, etc. John, I think it might be a bit too early to ask you this, but second World Cup, how's the journey been personally for you? Because I know it started in 2015, straight after that last game that we did at McKee Dawn Stadium, and then you said target was 2019. The 4-year cycle, how's it been for you? Because there's a lot of pressure being a coach of the Flying Fijians with so much talent at your disposal, with so many trips to be taken, family being away, planning and getting everything together, gelled, just for this tournament that's coming up at the Rugby World Cup. How's the journey been for the past 4 years?
Oh, look, the journey, it's been a fantastic journey. Fiji is a great place. Fijian people, fantastic people, and I just love Fiji. Rugby's part of the culture, and the people are really knowledgeable about the game. And you have critics, but you have critics anywhere, and I think that's the beauty of it. That there's lots of different ways of playing the game, and people have opinions on who should be in the team and who shouldn't be in the team, and that's part of the. Yeah. I think that's part of the culture of sport and rugby, and everyone's got an opinion, and that's great. On the rugby side of things, I think we've. Well, I know. I don't say I think. I know. We've achieved a lot in Fiji across that cycle, and although I'm not involved day to day in a lot of the things that are happening around the Fiji Rugby Union, and particularly the high performance unit, that you can see, that younger Fijian players, base players coming through and gaining selection for the Flying Fijians, and that's a reflection on, the academy program, and then more recently the Drua program. So all those things in place have had their effect in this World Cup, because some of those players are starting to come through, and that will have more effect in future World Cups, because more players who have come through our system will be representing the Flying Fijians. To get the under-20s back to the Junior World Championship was, and then to stay up there in their first tournament was a great effort. And what we really need, we need our best under-20s players playing against the best under-20 players from around the world, because that under-20 team is so important for our pathway, and those players can progress very quickly from under-20 Junior World Championship to the Flying Fijians, and already. We see some players from this year that could progress very quickly to Flying Fijian status. So it's not just about the Flying Fijians. I think on this cycle and having consistency in coaching from the Flying Fijians level, that filters down, because I talk with the 20s coaches, I talk with the academy coaches. We discuss the almost the Fiji fundamentals, the things that we need to work on, so players get a good grounding in the skills that they'll need as they go up the pathway. We've got a excellent S&C consultants working with the Flying Fijians, but they also work with the local strength and conditioning coaches, and the things that we're doing at Flying Fijian level come down through the Drua, through the academy into the under-20s. So all our developing players are getting touches from some internationally recognised coaches, and that pays off in the long term. And it's this World Cup's very important, besides the next one and the one after that. So we've got to make sure that the pathway is working very well, and the depth of players actually who can play international rugby at the highest level gets bigger and bigger.
Finally, before we wrap it up, John, and give you all our wishes for the Rugby World Cup, would you like to continue, or will we see you here? You've worked so hard, and you just explained a lot of things. Any decisions? Have you considered anything? Is it too early days to start thinking about what's going to happen post-World Cup?
Oh, look, I've have thought a little bit about it. My contract actually finishes at the end of the year. Like all things in the world of sport and coaching and rugby, performance is important. Yeah. So, I'm sure the CEO and the board will be looking at Rugby World Cup performance and and making their decisions about what happens going forward. Certainly for me, you know, post World Cup for me, I'd be happy to continue here as a Flying Fijians coach, and if everyone wants me to stay on.
I think that'll be something that those of us who've seen you work over these years and just with the coaching staff that you've assembled, I think, John, you've been doing a fantastic work, and believe me, that showed at the Flying Fijians Fun Day last Saturday that we were at. Just that atmosphere and that love that every Fijian is giving to the team and to yourself and to the coaching staff is just absolutely brilliant. Look, John, I know you've got a long few weeks ahead before we head off to and play our first game against the Wallabies in Japan. And obviously, those of us who won't be there will definitely be in front of TV screens, cheering our hearts out for you and the team. So all the best for the month-long tournament, John. And as we say, as you mentioned a bit earlier on, everyone's going to be a critic during that time. But I know they'll all be behind the team, John. So all the best to you. And also regards to the family and to the players and everybody. And I know you'll do Fiji proud. So that is the For the Record special tonight with the Flying Fijians head coach, John McKee. As I said, the excitement is building. You know what? Even the rugby fans are getting behind the team because they know this is the team that belongs to the people of Fiji. These players are playing for us. The 32-member squad that will be cut down to 31. Those 31 players need our support. Let's get behind them. Go Fiji, go should be the chant that we will be getting on starting from now, and let's hope right up until the later stages of the World Cup. So all the best to John and each and every player in that Flying Fijian squad, the coaching staff, the families, and a big winaka to all the fans who are always there with the Flying Fijians. Very good night.